Hi everyone, welcome to the BIH show. The round robin's over and now we're reaching the final week of the Elite Series as the playoffs come into view. I'm Craig Anderson. Joining me on this week's edition are the men who've kept us informed of the action on the ice all the way through the competition. It is, of course, the commentators. I speak to each of them from each club involved and get their thoughts on the competition so far, what they've made of their own teams and their rivals, and how they might fare in the playoffs. Please be mindful of the fact we did record this on Monday as the regular season ended and the playoffs began, but enjoy and hear what they had to say. Seth Bennett and Simon Harris from Manchester Storm, Ed Kimberley from Coventry Blaze, Nottingham Panthers, James Brandon, and Jonathan Fernley from Sheffield Steelers all share their thoughts on the tournament. Later, Ed, James and Jonathan chat to me, but first, it's Seth and Simon from the Storm. The first of our commentators are here to look back on the regular season games. I'm delighted to say Manchester Storm's duo, Simon Harris and Seth Bennett, are with us. Guys, thank you very much for joining us on the BIH show. Manchester finishing bottom of the pile, but that's by no means a disgrace. It's a very open competition. Simon, what have you made of the Storm's progress in this tournament so far?
It was a steady progress through the first few weeks. You know, took a little bit of a step back maybe the last couple of games, but it's good to see players, you know, come on game. Lundell Nua was doing really well. Tyson Fawcett just got his first goal last night. So, you know, it is good. You do see players progressing on all teams. So it's getting right at the business end of everything now with these knockout competitions. So hopefully we're ready for it.
And that's the good thing about this competition, Seth, the fact that all the teams have all beaten each other. Sheffield, you know, and Manchester, two teams you know very well. Manchester certainly aren't going to fear them, are they?
No, not at all. And I was actually really impressed. Number one, with the team that Ryan Finnerty drafted in the first place. But of course, secondly, how they played. You know, I thought they were really, really entertaining. Simon and I were together for their victory over Nottingham. And it should have been a much bigger margin of victory because they were dominant all the way through that game. They dominated in every single area of the ice. And I just look at Manchester and I see a side that can upset anybody at all in this competition. You know, look, Sheffield have got high octane offense, but I think Manchester are one of the teams that can actually match that. You know, they've got the kind of scoring through their lineup that is really, really strong. You know, loads and loads of depth, and I think that's really, really exciting. And you know, when you look at that team, a lot's going to come down to goaltending, and there's some question marks for Sheffield as to who's going to be between the pipes when it comes to these, you know, these postseason matches, if you like. And I think that's going to be maybe where this tie's won.
Now, when you look at the Storm players in particular, when you look at the scoring charts, Simon, Scott Simmons and Kieran Long are both up there, deservedly so. The two of them have had fantastic tournaments. How much have they played a big part in what Manchester have done? How much confidence do they give the team when they're on form?
Well, if I'm honest, you know, Scott Simmons is probably a little bit of a surprise package with the points because he's normally like the hard worker that you're going to have out there. He's the face-off winner. You know, he's the physicality in the side, but the fact that he's got the assists he has and he's chipped in with the goals as well, he's great to see because he's one of the players that really didn't get a lot of hockey with all the shutdown. So to see him come in and be so influential is really, really encouraging because I hope he's in a Storm jersey, you know, next season. Kieran Long, another one, we lost him to Belfast Giants. He wanted to give his hand at a bigger club in the Champions League, and to get him back was a bit of a coup. I think Ryan Finnerty did well to protect Kieran there, and he hit the ground running, and he's got himself a spot in the GB side, which I'm really proud of. Probably a bit too much, you know. I feel like a little kid. He's like, yeah, he's got in there, and you know that tweet he put out about "Don't give up on your dreams, keep going." It's like, oh, it's just brilliant. It's great to see. It's really, really, really like the highlight so far, I think, of the series for me.
Glad you brought that up, Simon. Seth, obviously you follow GB in your capacity as BBC's commentator. I spoke with Kieran not too long ago, and reaching the GB squad was one of his key aims and being part of this competition. I also remember speaking to him when he missed out on the squad 2 years ago. How much has this competition driven him to do just that?
I think it has. I think it's opened that door of opportunity, hasn't it? And within that GB squad, there is a Robert Farmer-shaped hole. And the question is, can Kieran Long be the player that fills in for Robert Farmer? I think that he has his opportunity now. People will always knock him for his skating and say, well, at that level, is he going to be able to skate with these guys? Well, let me tell you, the majority of the Brits are going to struggle with skating at the level of some of the top sides in world hockey. But Kieran Long has got a presence out there. He has a knack for being in the right place at the right time. When we look back to that Nottingham game, you know, Kieran Long made a goal by just going to the net. He got a tiny piece of the puck off the shaft of his stick that created a goal scoring opportunity. He has that ability to do that. He's somebody that is very natural in that respect. And whilst the modern game is skating, he skates well enough to be competitive, but that knack around the net is something that the GB squad doesn't have in abundance. And I could see where he would fit in very nicely as a tournament goes on. And, you know, for Pete Russell, let's find out. Let's find out, can Kieran Long play at this level? If he can't, you know, there's no issue with that. But this is a shot to nothing, this tournament for GB. So let's have a look at the British guy that scored all the goals over the last 2-3 years.
And another player I think who's been very influential, just when I look down the list there, and he's quite high up in the scoring, Dallas Earhart, the captain, of course. And Dallas has been at the club a good while now. Simon, you're smiling there as soon as I mentioned his name. He's been a key part of this team, and I think he was one of the first real picks that Ryan Finnerty had when he was putting this team together.
Well, the thing why I'm smiling about Dallas is he leads us with shots and shots on goal, and you know why? Because he plays obviously on the power play unit and he throws them towards net, so you understand that. But it's mental when a defender has so many more shots than, you know, the forwards underneath him. And he's also stepping up as well. He's not just sticking on that blue line putting these shots in. He's skating in. We've seen some great goals that he scored the other night. You know, he's putting his stick through his legs. He's trying to turn on the style, and it's kind of typical Dallas. We do see it throughout a regular season, and he does tend to have maybe a more slow, shored start and then ends up being very influential. So to see it in this 4 weeks that we've had, it does bring a smile to myself, because it's like condensed Dallas, if you could do so, if you could call it that. He's a very influential player. You know, he's got the physical element. He'll stand up for his team. He'll chip in with goals. He's a good defender. So he's the complete package. And hopefully he's here for the rest of his career as well. So, Seth, which of the sort of new faces that have come into the Manchester team have impressed you? You've got the likes of Martin Gran, who I think has really, he started off a bit slowly, but he's maybe found his form as the tournament's gone on. You've got the Glasgow duo, I've got to mention them. Craig Peacock and Matt Haywood have made a contribution as well. Even the younger players, Ben Solder, Joe Hazeldine, I think has been excellent. Harry Gulliver has made a bit of a contribution. Who stood out for you?
Well, I think there are 3 names. I think there's Glaverstad, I think there's Lundell Noah, and I think there's Joe Hazeldine. And you can't underestimate what Joe Hazeldine's done in this tournament. You know, 2 months ago, he was playing in the NIHL North Cup for the Nottingham Lions. 6 weeks later, he's playing Line 1D in the Elite League, something that he's never done in his life. He barely got a shift for the last 2 or 3 years. You know, so he's gone away and he's worked on his game and he's found a way to contribute. And Ryan Finnerty's confidence in him grew as the tournament went on. He didn't shy at any point in throwing him out there. He was on the first penalty kill unit at times. He was on that first line playing with Dallas Earhart. And you saw him grow in confidence again as the whole series went on. And he was contributing. And he's an offensive-minded defenseman, just like his younger brother. And the pair of them have got that ability to just jump into the play, to read the play. And defensively, is he still a little bit naive? Yeah, but he's 20 playing first line D in a series where you have some seriously experienced players. So I think for me, I think he's just been a massive find. And I'll say this now, if Paul Swindlehurst ain't going to Latvia, I would put my mortgage on Joe Hazeldine being the guy that gets called up to replace him in that squad. And what an experience that would be for a young kid, because whoever the GB coach is going to be in 5-6 years' time, he's going to be the guy that's out there and he's going to be contributing in a massive way to the Great Britain programme. You look at London Noah, he's a guy that just oozes class when he's out there on the ice. Maybe he's a little bit perimeter at times, but he's a great skater, great puck protector, creative player. I really like what he brings to the table. I think Klaverstad, we talked about this in commentary the other night in that Nottingham game. Wouldn't surprise to see him signing up with Manchester for next season. And I know that might raise a few eyebrows. I think he's really enjoyed this experience of being in Manchester, being part of the Elite League. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's somebody that ends up in the Elite League and hopefully with Manchester.
So we'll touch on the other teams in the competition before we talk about the playoffs. And I'm mindful this is Monday when we're recording this. By the time you watch this, that the playoffs could well have started. But I just want to get the pick of the other teams' players as well. Simon, starting with you, who stood out for you from the games you've seen?
Oh, I'll go with the easy ones. I'll make Seth work. I'll go with Keck at Coventry. You can't really see past him, can you? No matter what happens here on in, he's gonna be the find of the series. It's got to be, him linking up with Hammond. It's just been mental to watch. Because he's come from college. It's not like he's got a CV behind him as such, and he's hit the ground running. And I think there'll be a few teams offering him contracts. So he's been really impressive. As have Coventry, I like the way Danny Stewart's teams play. They're very offensive. They've got that kind of buzz about them. So him so far, and I like Oldham at Sheffield, just to perhaps mention one of the ones that doesn't really get like the headlines like Kirk and Ebley. So Oldham, I like him. Who else have we got? And we touched on London Noah for Storm. Those are the ones that have pretty much stood out for me.
Seth?
I think, look, the absolute hero of this tournament has got to be Liam Kirk. You look at what he brings: speed, shot, creativity, and he's a kid that's gone away and learnt his craft, hasn't he? And to me, he's the most explosive player in this tournament. Oldham, wonderful player, but Liam Kirk has got to be the one outstanding player. I think another one who I've really enjoyed watching throughout this tournament has got to be David Clements. I've known Clemo for 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And he is an effervescent character. He's a guy that I remember in a playoff final, he went out and he got to the end of warm-up and he was just messing around on the ice in the playoff final. It was the year that Nottingham beat Sheffield. And he was messing around with balloons on the ice. And he was absolutely winding up the Sheffield players who were refusing to leave the ice until he left the ice. But he just kept, and he was a kid. He was a kid that was just winding up the opposition, messing around, doing this, doing that, doing the other. And he's somebody I've been waiting to really kick on because he's better than just being a sixth defenseman. And we've seen in this series, he skates well. He's an offensive defenseman. He sees that first pass. And in this tournament, he's had the time and the opportunity to express himself on the power play. He's had the time to express himself at even strength as well. So he's been somebody that I've really, really enjoyed watching perform throughout this series. And I suppose that's pretty much all she wrote for me in terms of other players that I've not mentioned that have done really well. I think that, I got to be honest, I'm disappointed with Nottingham. I think they've had fits and starts. They've not done nearly enough for me in this tournament. I think that we all looked at the draft and thought that their goaltending was going to be the difference amongst all the teams. But I just think defensively, they've not done enough. They've not been good enough in this tournament.
So that takes us nicely to the playoff semi-finals. As I say, mindful of the fact that by the time this goes out, the playoffs will have started. Guys, are we going to see Manchester in the playoff final next weekend?
It's a possibility, isn't it? I mean, we're 2-2. We're pretty evenly matched up. I had just a glance at the stats from last night, and they're pretty even. Everything from face-offs to power play percentage, everything's pretty evened out. So I hope so. Obviously, I really hope so. But I think it'll just take Manchester to play their complete game, and if they can do that over the 2 legs, then yeah, we can beat Sheffield. But you just perhaps think Sheffield have got that little bit of firepower in the locker that'll see them through. If you can keep them under 5 goals, you're doing well, and you give yourself a chance.
For me, Craig, it comes down to goaltending. And we don't know who's going to be between the pipes for the Sheffield Steelers across this series. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing for me. You look at the fact that in reality, if Bonner has a good series, he gives Manchester a chance. And if he can keep Sheffield to under 3 goals a game, then Manchester will most likely win this series. And that's the way you've got to see it. If you're Ryan Finnerty, Ryan Finnerty has religiously played 4 lines all the way through this series. He's just rolled them. Not every other coach has done that. Now he can tighten up his bench. He can pick when he throws that 4th unit out. He can juggle things around a little bit to get, Ben Davies out there a little bit more regularly when he needs him. Same with Matt Haywood. If he's looking to stiffen up a little bit, maybe he doesn't throw out that genuine 4th line. Maybe what he looks to do is rotate those guys in with a different winger. He might decide to go down to 3 centres. There's a ton of options for Finner in these games. And the big question is, defensively, how are they going to handle Alden and Kirk? Are they going to get distracted by Connolly's antics? And can they handle Tanner Eberle? Eberle's not a natural goal scorer. He's a mucker and a grinder and a guy that is, he's been very much through his career kind of a 3rd line type player. In this series, he's exploded and really been very, very good. Are they going to be able to deal with that speed, if you like? I think that Manchester, if they play well, they can, but it's going to come down to goaltending. That's the biggest X factor in this series. And who's between the pipes? How rusty will they be? How on form will they be at either end? That's going to be the biggest contributing factor.
Great to hear from you guys. Great insight, and appreciate your time as always. Thanks for joining us on the BI8 show. I dare say we'll catch up soon.
Cheers, mate.
Joining me for this next part of the BI8 show is the other commentators, the guys who have provided their voices to the games that have taken place in the Motorpoint Arena. We'll just go round the houses. Ed Kimberley is on the top left there with the headphones on. Give us a wave, Ed.
Hey, guys.
James Brandon, bottom left-hand corner from Nottingham Panthers.
Hello.
And Jonathan Fernley of the Sheffield Steelers. Hi, Jonathan.
Evening, everybody.
Now, this is the rest day before the playoffs start this week, and I just want to get your take on the competition so far, find out who stood out for you guys in all the games you've seen from your own team and from the other team. We'll start with you, Ed. The competition's been a great spectacle. How much have you enjoyed the experience of being involved in this?
Oh, yeah, massively. I mean, when we do the Blaze webcasts, they're kind of 1-2 cameras, and that's kind of it. Whereas, we've got 8 to 10 direction in here. It's a great experience. I think the weirdest thing for me has just been that, I've been to the Motorpoint Arena and to various guises throughout the years, and it's empty. And you got this great big arena and everything's dark, and you're just walking through it to go to the restroom or whatever. It's nuts. No, it's amazing. Honestly, it's I think we're all pretty blessed to have the opportunity to do this after a year and whatever.
And I've got to ask what it's like behind the scenes. Having worked with Dave Burnham in the past, he's a guy who's very clued up. He knows exactly, what he does. Mm-hmm. Him and his team offer a fantastic service. James, we'll cross to you on this one. What is it like behind the scenes? How much are you kept informed of what's going on in the background?
Well, yeah, I'm sure both the guys will say is in your ears what you do in the commentary days, saying camera 2, camera. We've got whoever coming for the post period interview, and we've got the interviews before the game, and everything you want to know is pulled straight down your ear. Sometimes you have to block it out for a bit of white noise whilst the game's going on, but the stuff that you do need to hear, you do take on board. And yeah, you couldn't ask for it to have run any smoother, other than perhaps a bit of extra bandwidth to start the series, wasn't it?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to bring that up with you, James. What was that like, that opening night where they had the difficulties going on and the game ended up going on YouTube? How did that affect you and how you broadcast that night?
In terms of affecting me, not at all, really. It was just an 8 o'clock face-off as opposed to a 7 o'clock one. I suppose it was the players that would have been affected more, having to go out to warm up twice. And I think it was Sheffield didn't come back out, and not that it really mattered in the end of the final score, but Sheffield didn't come back out to warm up, so all their routines and everything would have been messed up by that. But we've got through it, and here we are now with the playoffs one day away.
Certainly is. Jonathan, from a Sheffield Steelers point of view, you've got Ron Shudra alongside you in co-coms. Dave Sims joined you for the on-camera stuff. Who's the biggest diva?
Well, it's not me. I'll let the other two of them decide, because I think that's actually a title that they both want rather than having bestowed upon them. But it's been very easy to get back into the swing of things, because I'm so used to working with Ron Shudra. I'm so used to having Dave Burnham in the ear. It's just like a regular Steelers home webcast. The only thing that's toned down, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys as well, is that we don't have quite so many of the frivolous in-jokes as we would during a normal regular season game. It's all a little bit too serious for that at the moment.
And of course, the tournament itself has really gained in strength. As we've said, the playoffs are about to begin. So let's look back on the regular season, inverted commas, and how that's gone. Ed, we'll start with you. Coventry have ended it in second place. I think that's 5 wins out of 12 as I look at the table at the moment. How much have you enjoyed this Coventry team, and who's impressed you?
Yeah, it's been a great group to watch. Actually, they've been a lot of fun. I think, straight off the bat, we had the youngest team out of everybody. I think the average age was kind of around 2 years, give or take, younger. That came with some praise, I think, from the wider community that we'd gone so young. And yeah, as a result, I think it's worked out really well. We didn't, of course, have Swindlehurst for any of the regular season after picking up an injury in Blackburn there, so that was a bit of a blow. But it's allowed guys like David Clements to rise to the occasion, and Clem's been superb. He had the goal against Manchester there that took the game to OT. He had the wonderful goal against Manchester, and he had another big goal as well that I forget. But yeah, he played superbly, and that combination of Keck and Hammond there kind of did what Luke Farrar and Yanni Larkinen did last year and kind of stole the spotlight from them. But no, we talked to some of the guys on Blaze TV as well throughout, trying to get some content out there for the fans and, give them something extra to grab a hold of, because obviously they're not in the buildings. But everyone we spoke to has been great, a joy.
And James, of course, working in the Motorpoint Arena, something you'll have been used to, having done it before, obviously. How different is it without the fans? How do you build off the energy off that? I know what it's like when we hear that, the players build off the energy of the fans, but even as a commentator, having done it myself, you feel the energy in the room. It must be weird without it.
Oh, it's so weird. It was the exhibition game against Coventry. The first goal that went in, although you didn't really know what to do. And you had to make it up and more excitement yourself. I know it was an exhibition game as well, so there wasn't fully in intensity, but it was just so quiet. And it seemed like, not that you weren't broadcasting to anybody because you knew that people were watching and whatever, but it just seemed like you guys were there, the players were there, and that was it. So you just had to try and create as much excitement as you could. But it was tough. But once you got into it and you knew that people were watching and you got the feedback on social media and whatnot with the players that were scoring, you knew who they liked, who they weren't perhaps fancying this week. It was tough, but different. And I didn't enjoy it with the no fans there, but you get through it, don't you? And you try and bring the best broadcast that you can.
Well, let's talk about the Panthers, actually, James. Obviously, they've had a bit of an up and down campaign. I think there's been 1 or 2 injuries that have played their part, 1 or 2 other things in the background. What have you made of the Panthers, and who stood out for you from the Panthers' point of view?
Yeah, well, it was a slow start, really, wasn't it? And then they got it together in the middle, and then sort of hit and miss towards the end. But the guy that probably, the obvious ones you can pick are the top scorers, say Boivin and Domingue. But the guy that probably brought it all together was Brett Pellini when he came back from Italy. The Panthers weren't hitting all the marks. And then Pellini came in, a guy that's been with the club for a couple of years, knows what the arena's like, knows the dressing rooms and whatever. He was the guy that came together, and then the Panthers did pick it up. Matheson got into his stride. Talbot Tassi and the other defenseman as well had gotten into it. So I'd probably say the underrated guy of the whole series really was Brett Pellini, although he did get a point a game. It just wasn't up there because he didn't play all 12.
And Jonathan, same for Sheffield. Who have you in particular enjoyed watching in this competition? I mean, there's been quite a few that leap into my head, certainly. Let's hear it from you. Who's stuck out for you?
Well, although the forwards have taken most of the headlines because of the number of goals the Steelers have been scoring, the early impressions I had of this team was how good it looked defensively. I think had John Muse played a lot more earlier in the tournament, the Steelers' defense might have got a little more praise than they did. Beaudry and Saxry, Danielson and Schultz have been terrific. We know how good Sam Jones has been at Fife, and he's slotted in, seamlessly. Really, David Phillips seems like he's been around forever because around the league he pretty much has, and it's just been a really good, solid unit. But the way the Steelers play, they can sometimes get a little exposed. They're required to get involved in the offense quite a lot, and so the defensive numbers don't look great. But on an individual basis, I would love to see them all back in orange again next year because they have impressed. Yeah, players like Connolly and Olden and Kirk and McKiska, they're going to get the headlines. But defensively, I think in particular, Schultz, Beaudry have been excellent pickups. And I think there will be an intention to try and keep them on next year.
Now, the one thing I've enjoyed about the tournament is the way that the guys they've gone from, in some cases, not playing at all to having some game time before, but you can see that the lines have gelled, the teams themselves have gelled as well. Ed, back to you. Coventry, you mentioned the Keck and Hammond line earlier on and just how fruitful that's been. How do you compare that with the team from last year? I say last year, 1920. How do you compare that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like I said earlier, we've gone so much younger. Although to be fair, last year I think we only had Drew Schistel and Yanni Larkin over the age of 30 when the season started. But I think Danny's pretty much gone to the same blueprint that he did that year. He's picked up a couple of guys straight out of the NCAA in Jermaine and Keck there, and they worked out really well. It was similar to how Polkamp, Curran, and Eichstad worked. They were fresh out the NCAA, and I think all three of them in various ways impressed. And then he stuck to some of the bodies that he knew. He knew what he was going to get out of Mike Hammond. Like he said, he wasn't going to leave him on the table, depending on what happened in Denmark. They didn't want him to fall down to whoever was after us. I forget now. It seems like long ago. And then, Luke Ferrara was always going to be protected. He came back from Poland, slotted right in there with Yanni. And then I think really in that line, the only difference is they had Andy Johnston last year, and he was amazing on that line. He was the glue. And I don't think they've quite found a partner that sits perfectly in that spot. I think maybe the only downside, and I'm not entirely sure why this is against from last year, but for some reason our third line, we didn't have a fourth line, has kind of struggled with their puck possession at times and kind of caught chasing the game, which has caused a little bit of criticism at times, I think, from Danny constructively. But look, like you said, some of these guys haven't played for 12 months. And it's a very brief time to pull it together. But look, we finished second, I think, for the Blaze. That was a really, really good result. We've avoided the Steelers because we were rubbish against them. And I think it's going to be an interesting matchup with Nottingham starting tomorrow.
It certainly is. And I think another thing that stood out for me is the showcase and the British talent that's involved, certainly the younger players that have come through. And let's kind of look at the wider sort of community of players that are involved in this competition. Which British players have stood out, particularly the younger ones? Liam Kirk's an obvious one because he's come on so well since we last seen him on these shores. But who's really stood out from a young British point of view? James, you first.
Well, you say young. Well, I'll just put these guys. Well, one of these guys is not a young player anymore. But the line that the Panthers ran with the Rob Lakovic, Ollie Bettridge, and Lewis Hook was some people may have looked at that and thought, oh, I don't know about these guys all on the same line, but it really worked in terms of two-way players, all three of them really doing absolutely everything out there with the two defensemen as well. But Lewis Hook was a guy that had done well previously, but of course got a little bit better over the last year. But in terms of the Panthers, Josh Tetlow has just come on leaps and bounds. I said during one of the games, it seems like he's realised over the last month or so, he's 6'7", bigger than pretty much everybody out there, and can actually put in some hits and check some guys in the corner. And he picked up a couple of penalties, and that's what you expect with a guy that's that big against some of the smaller guys. But Tetlow is somebody that I've seen for the last 3 years or so, and now you wouldn't hesitate to put him and start him out there and put him on that top defensive line.
Jonathan?
Hazeldine. Every time I watch him, it makes me think that the Panthers are going to regret that for a decade. He just looks so comfortable, and you're looking for the great British defenseman of the future, and there he is, right there. I've been hugely impressed with him every time I've seen him. He just doesn't look out of place. There's no shortage of confidence in puck carrying, in his passing, in his checking. I wish he was a Steeler, to be honest, but the Storm have really pulled a coup in getting him over to their side.
Interesting. Earlier in the podcast, we spoke with Seth Bennett, part of the Manchester Storm sort of commentary team. And just when you mentioned Hazeldine there, Jonathan, he actually reckons Hazeldine will be on the plane for GB ahead of Paul Swindlehurst. What do you make of that, Ed? Paul's playing with you guys right now. What do you make of that comment?
Well, that's the point. He hasn't been, has he? And like Jonathan said, Hazeldine's been superb. So that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. And it's no slight on Paul. If you want to take a defenseman with a bit of size, like I think James was talking about Tetlow a minute ago, that can mix it up in the corners and be pretty responsible. He's your guy. But Hazeldine showed that he can do that. He's not a small guy, but he's probably got better skating upside. And it's amazing that Finnity's just kind of let him off his leash to be that puck carrying defenseman, and it works out well for him. And while we're talking about British players and puck moving defensemen, again, our boy David Clements I mentioned earlier, he's really, really jumped on leaps and bounds, taken the opportunity afforded to him with both hands. So it's great that he's going to be on the plane for his first cap, and I doubt he'll get iced, but Jordan Headley has been very impressive for every game that he's iced for the Blaze, and kept them in it. There have been games where I think he's played 3 or 4, and we could have been 5 goals adrift, and he's still on his head to keep us alive in them. So yeah, I'm really pleased for both of those guys.
Now, as I say, it's playoffs week this week. The semi-finals start on Tuesday as we record, and then the second leg's over Wednesday and Thursday. Then the finals start on Saturday. It could be 2 games, it could be 3 games. We just don't know. So how is this week going to pan out? Back to you, James.
Am I allowed to say the Steelers without anybody coming to attack me from the Nottingham side? But they're clearly the best side, clearly have got more firepower, other than, of course, the Blazers have got plenty of firepower. But the Steelers have got it through 5 guys up there as opposed to just Keck and Hammond, really. So not the Steelers, but the Steelers.
Jonathan?
The Steelers still have a question mark in goal in terms of, are they going to risk John Muse, who we've seen 32 minutes of, and he looked pretty good, but we don't really know if he's fit. It's a big gamble to put him in, and if he just slightly aggravates it, then one of the backups has got to go in cold, and that has sometimes worked and not always worked. That's the only real question mark over the Steelers, as well as Churchfield and Warburton have played, and they have impressed, but they've impressed from their role as inexperienced backups, as players making their way in the professional game. They'll develop into much better goalies than they are at the moment. If the Steelers had a fit and healthy John Muse, again, the Steelers would be even bigger favourites than they are currently. I've mentioned this on the Steelers broadcast already this tournament. It's just down to the Steelers offense. Can they score enough goals to win? They've been involved in a lot of close games, but the games when they've scored 2, 3, and 4 have been the games that they've lost. So the Steelers almost have to sort of forget who's in goal and go all out all the time with the intention of scoring a hatful. Yes, you're going to be exposed the other way, but those goals will go past any goalkeeper. So let's just concentrate on scoring plenty. It's worked for the Steelers throughout Aaron Fox's reign. The Steelers have always been a high-scoring team under his leadership. So we just want to see that continue. I don't think reverting to traditional playoff hockey, tight, gritty stuff is the way for the Steelers to go at all.
So, Ed, why are Coventry going to win this Elite Series then? Come on, let's have it.
Well, to be honest with you, I've been saying this with Stu for the last couple of games. They've pretty much got the foundations. Statistically speaking, they've got one of, if not the best netminders in Shane Owen. Best power play, best penalty kill, top goal scorer, top assists guy, top point scorer. They're there. They've got a great top six. Even if they're trying to figure out the conundrum of who you stick with Yanni and Ferrara there. But the one thing that's killed the Blaze has just been some decisions on the puck. They've cleared up the defensive zone, which was a little bit worrying for the first week or so. So, yeah, if we can make better decisions on the puck, not panic, which a couple of the guys have said that P word in various interviews. They cleaned that up. I really think that them and the Steelers are the two teams in this competition. And, possibly that's what the final is going to look like.
Can I give some reasoning for the Panthers then, seeing as I didn't know we were doing it that way around. I thought we were saying that who you think would win it. Looking then, Ed's just listed off all the stats there that are in favour of the Blaze, but the one that perhaps matters most in playoff hockey is conceding goals and keeping them out. And the Panthers, although they've not scored hatfuls, haven't let in as many as the other teams, with two netminders like Jackson Whistle and Ben Bounds, perhaps even that way around in the playoffs, having what we've seen in the so-called regular season. That may come down to it. You may win games 2-1. You may have to go 2-2 and get an overtime winner. But with those two guys back there and somebody like Mark Matheson, then why not make it the Panthers? Can we delete that bit that I said earlier?
That's it now. So what's been the highlight of the competition so far? What goal, what moment has got you kind of off your feet? I'm not sure if it was you, Ed, that was really talking up the David Clement's goal the other day, the coast-to-coast one. Was that you or was it Stu? I can't remember, but that's certainly up there. Your own personal point of view then, what's been the highlights been?
I think the Clements one was pretty close. There've been some really good moments. The Blaze have played some very entertaining hockey and certainly had some games they've taken to OT inside the last minute, which we've called, which have been fun. But I think just because he's been around a while, he's from Coventry, he's always kind of been that sixth defenseman, and just his personality, outside of the rink, he always talks to the fans. He always has time for the media guys. He even took me up on an offer to go play a round of golf last summer when we were allowed to. He's a stand-up guy. So to see Clements score 3 goals, I think he's got 5 assists. All 3 were big goals, and particularly that coast to coast marker. That's probably my highlight with all of that context thrown in there.
James,
I'll go for 2 really. The Tristan Keck one early on, short-handed, just blazed down. Well, if you excuse that, went down the right-hand side and just fired it straight into the top corner. And I think that was when Strax was on commentary with me, and he was just like, "Whoa!" when that went in. It was just came out of absolutely nowhere. And then he obviously went on to score hatfuls of goals in that. But Ollie Bettridge the other day, going in and out a couple of the defenders, and then on his way down pretty much on the floor and just managed to poke it through the netminder's legs. That was, if the fans were in there, Ollie is an obviously loved guy at the Panthers anyway. If the fans were in there, the roof would have come off.
And Jonathan.
I'm glad you mentioned that one, James, because I was about to if you hadn't. That's my favourite Panthers goal. My favourite Blaze goal, I loved Ross Venus's overtime winner. Not as a great goal, but just the way that game went with Nottingham just pummeling the shots in. One of the most one-sided games in terms of shot count you'll ever see, up until the late power play when Coventry flipped the switch and just fired in a ton on bounds and finally forced it through in overtime. For me, despite all the big Sheffield wins and the goals we've scored, that was the game I've enjoyed watching most throughout this tournament. And from a Steelers perspective, Jason Hewitt scoring again for the Steelers. He's got a couple, but that first one against Manchester was a really special moment. I'd seen him score a few for the Steel Dogs during the Spring Cup, but that was a really nice moment.
Excellent. I think that's a good way to end it, gentlemen. Can I just say on behalf of everybody, we've really enjoyed your work throughout this tournament. We look forward to hearing more of it in the next few days. So thank you for that. And also thank you for coming on the BIH show. It's been good to hear your points of view in the tournament so far and the tournament ahead. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Huge thanks to Ed Kimberley, James Brandon and Jonathan Fernley, plus Seth Bennett and Simon Harris from earlier. Big week coming up in Nottingham, and we can't wait to see who's crowned the champion at the end of it. Check out the latest news on britishicehockey.co.uk. Follow us on social media via Twitter and Instagram, and like the official Facebook page. And don't forget to download the audio edition of the BIH show via your podcast provider, where you'll find all our previous editions there as well. In the meantime, stay safe, enjoy the week ahead in the Elite Series, and I'll be back soon for another edition of the BIH show. Take care. Bye for now.